All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Noah Fisher, and today with me, I have the director of a very, very impeccable upcoming short film called The Wake. I'd like to introduce to you all writer, director, and producer, Luis Gerard.
Hi there. Thanks for the kind intro.
Oh, no problem at all. And before we go any further, I'd just like to say I got an opportunity to watch The Wake and watch it again and probably 3 more times. I would just like to say what an impeccable short. Honestly, it was, it was very well shot, very well directed. There was a lot of really great lingering shots that, they didn't like, you understand what they were implying by that ending, but like towards the beginning, there were just some shots that really just made you feel like unsettled in ways that like I couldn't really pinpoint exactly. And overall, for those that don't know, The Wake tells the story of these 2 brothers whose parents run a funeral service. And what they do is that when they get the information of the people that died, and then they go and they break into their homes, take their stuff. Not stuff that not like huge things, but like things that they think no one's gonna look for or miss. Now, there are actually quite a few things that I'd like to know, because there were a couple aspects of this film that like really caught me off guard. One, you had your child actors. Their names were the 2 main characters, Xander and Isaac. First, the stigma. You have child actors, especially with Xander, who we will get to why I want to talk about him in a bit. But with Isaac, it's sometimes it can be very difficult to get a good performance out of your child actors, because they're either clearly having this pushed on them, or this might be their first role and they're trying really hard. With Isaac and Xander in particular, it felt natural. It felt like they didn't need to like put on a face pretend. They just fit right into the role. So tell me, what was it like working with them and getting the performances that you wanted out of them?
Well, first of all, I mean, the main credit goes to them. They did the work. They were in the case of Isaac, who I think is extremely talented. He took the role very seriously. He had to prepare on many levels. He had to prepare. He had to learn his dialogue in sign language. So he had to study on his own. He had to prepare. It was also quite a physical role, since you've seen the film. There's a lot of like cycling, and intense cycling, and not like flat roads. Sometimes it's like going uphill. So it was, from a physical standpoint, it was also a demanding role. And then there's something that also it's something that comes with him. It's a tricky role, because it's I would say he's a bit of a sociopath. He's not, I wouldn't say he's a bad guy, but you could definitely say he's far from perfect. So he's doing things that are questionable in the film. So how you go with that character, and also I'm a part of that as well, making sure that it's a character that people sympathize with and care for, despite the fact that he's doing things that are morally incorrect. So I think that's something that he brought with his physique, with his aura. I would say he has an angel in that sense. And then in the case of Xander, Xander had never acted before. This was his first ever acting experience. In fact, Xander was 9 years old when I casted him. And when we started shooting, he had just turned 10. Isaac was 15. And so Isaac had done a couple of like things as a child actor and in a TV show for kids in Canada. So he had done a couple of things, but he's not like acting is not like the thing he's like is, focused on. He's also a dancer. He does a lot of things. I believe he's studying. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think it's business what he's studying right now. So we're about to start studying, so it's not like focusing on acting. None of them were professional actors, and so there was a lot of work in prep, like in rehearsals. Like I told you, I had someone, a deaf actor, so about 16 years old, who taught not only Isaac but also the parents their lines in sign language. So that was part of the process. We did a lot of like rehearsing. And then there was also another thing that always worried me, because especially in the case of Sander, he had never acted before, and I always felt he was a bit shy. I say jokingly, but sometimes seriously. I wasn't sure if he really wanted to make the film. I remember even during the casting process, he was casted, and then when I called him back for a second session, the producer told me that he didn't want to come because he didn't want to do the film. So we had to convince him a little bit to come back. So he was quite shy. And obviously a big theme in the movie is brotherhood, the relationship between these two brothers. And because there's like an age difference, one 10, the other 15, and obviously one cannot speak. How do you create a bond that feels legitimate or feels authentic in front of the camera? So I had them spend time together. We scheduled like days where they would go to escape rooms, so they would interact and have fun, and it was just playing around for them, nothing related to the movie. So they built a bond off screen, and I think that shines on screen. It comes through, hopefully.
It really did. And I was actually even going to ask, like, how did you, because what I want to get across to people who haven't seen the film yet is that, there is always going to be a stigma with child actors, but with here, it didn't feel like two kids acting. The roles, the performances felt natural. And I did want to know, like, how did you build up that chemistry? How did you make them, because they acted like brothers. There was never a moment on screen where I'm just like, oh, great, here we go. They're pretending to act like brothers, but it's probably just, they don't know how to act, so they're trying their best. But like, no, there was never a dull performance or a moment where I doubted what I was seeing on screen. And the fact that, considering the content of the film, that you had them do an escape room, that is, a little windy here, my bad. But the fact you had them do an escape room, a little on the nose, if I do say so myself, but definitely perfect for what the film was actually trying to capture, which brings me into, I guess, the next main point. You did answer a couple of aspects of it in terms of Xander, because Xander, for those that don't know, in the film, he plays a deaf child, and that is because he is actually deaf. So, first question, what made you make the choice to make Martin's character deaf? Was it something that was part of the script, or did you see Xander audition and you're just like, oh, I need to make this character deaf. I want this kid in my film.
So it's very funny, and this is the truth. It was in the script, but when I came up with the idea for the script, or for the film, because my initial idea was for a feature film, but I never wrote it as a feature. I wrote it as a short. And as I started writing the film, they were both brothers were like, they could speak. None of them was deaf. And funny enough, as I'm writing the last scene in the film, I came up with the idea, what am I making deaf? And obviously you've seen the film, so you understand why it works with the story. But then I also thought about it because I wrote the script in 2017, so way before Coda or Sound of Metal or some of the movies that, and you're also seeing a lot of um, people of the deaf community, even in TV commercials, you're seeing them now. So there's Hollywood is like trying to embrace minorities and people that normally did not have a voice in movies, whether it's women, African American, or minorities in general, and people of the deaf community are part of that. But again, when I wrote it, I thought, well, it would be interesting because it would add a freshness to the story, because it's not something that I've seen recently. I mean, the one movie I remember seeing where the lead and was deaf, and a big part of the story revolved around that was Children of a Lesser God, and that's like a movie from the 80s. The female actress in that movie who won an Oscar plays the mom in Coda. So it's an actress that you rarely see, at least in commercial movies. So anyway, I thought it would be like a fresh approach to make one of the main characters deaf. And obviously it worked in the story for the reasons that since you've seen it.
Sorry,
now it's become a bigger thing, which is great.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. For those of you watching, the reason why we're not getting into details on the story is that this is one of those, unlike other films, this is one where I feel, and I'm sure Luis feels the same, if you go into this movie blind, not deaf, not knowing anything, the real punch, the gut punch of the story, it's going to be a much better experience if we don't spoil what happens in the film, because this is a film that's definitely worth going in, with absolutely no knowledge as to what or even how the story ends. Sorry for interrupting you.
Not at all. And back to your question. I mean, or I'm not sure if it was a part of your question, but once the making of the film became a reality, and I started the process, the pre-production process, I had the options of either casting a normal actor to play someone who was deaf, or I had the option of casting someone who was really deaf. And I pondered on both for a bit, but I decided to go for the real thing because I thought that authenticity would benefit the film, and also like I felt like giving an actor a chance to be on screen that maybe rarely would get the opportunity, I think would make it more special, not only for myself, but also for that actor.
No, and that's good that you actually decide to go that route and give, someone who's deaf the opportunity to actually, flex their chops a little bit, even if Xander had some doubts of it at some point. Because, I remember there's a story from I think the actress that played Speedster in Eternals, where there were times where she was, a bit uncomfortable because she's looking for direction, and the director had a hard time like directing scenes with her because she'd be pointing some places, and she's like, I don't know where you want me to look. So it's that leads me to, was there, like, during the actual meat of the shoot, were there times where you had a hard time communicating to Xander what it is you wanted to get across to the scene? Like, was there an interpreter on set? Do you actually know sign language?
Yes. From the moment I decided to go with a deaf child, immediately we brought in an interpreter, and the interpreter brought in another interpreter because they work in tandem. Because I didn't know this at the time, but I found out very early in the process, like way before we started shooting, that they work in tandem, because after a few minutes, one would get tired and then the other one would take over, because it's those things that you don't normally think about. But yeah, the process of me telling telling her what I want, then she translates, then the boy might have a question, and then she has to like come back to me. So they would get tired after a few minutes and they would keep switching. So that was something that made it challenging because it was something that I had never done before. Um, and yeah, that process of not being able to speak to an actor directly, in this case a child, just made things a little bit yeah, more complex for myself as a director, because I don't really know what they're saying. I have to trust that the translation is accurate. So, and there's no way for me to know until I see the boy in camera doing what I asked. And sometimes it wasn't accurate, so I would have to like come back and fix things. But for the most part, I because we did a lot of rehearsing, I was familiar with the process. So I was prepared for that before the shoot. Um, and in terms of like one scene, there's maybe one scene that was challenging. It's hard to talk about that scene without spoiling the movie, but it's towards the end because it's more of an emotional scene, and he's, like I said, had just turned 10 and had never acted before. So that was a scene that took a while to get to. But I'm happy. I'm happy with what he did. I'm very proud with what Sander did.
That's really great to hear. And I'm glad that the troubles that were not troubles, but more or less the slight inconveniences, because it doesn't sound like there were many problems on set. There weren't egos being tossed around. So it is nice to know that the inconveniences were only very minor overall. And I'm guessing in terms of the overall actual shooting process, not just with Xander or Isaac, but just overall, I'm guessing it was more of I never want to say an easy breezy shoot, because anyone that's actually worked on a film knows that no shoot is ever easy breezy. You will always run into issues, whether that be you can't secure a location one day, or maybe you're in post-production and you're just like, these files are corrupted. Now I need to re-upload them and spend the next 3 weeks waiting to get these things color corrected again. So overall, what I'm actually just kind of wondering is, with the exception of, the issues you may have had in terms of like the translation between you and your deaf actor, were there any other sort of inconveniences or maybe even problems that you faced while shooting, whether that be through development, actual filming, or post?
Well, I would say during the shoot was hard. The shoot was hard. Unfortunately, there was people in the production that weren't great, and that made the production harder than it should have been. I'm not going to say names, but if they ever watch this, I don't know who I'm talking about. However, I did have some great partners as well, that helped get through those moments. And so the hardest part of the film or the production was definitely the shoot. Yeah, as I say that, I also had some great partners in the film. And for example, Christopher Mably, who's the director of photography and who was also an executive producer. So he was not just a photographer, he was also an executive producer, and he was an amazing partner in it. Josie Astapia, who was my first AD, and I also became an executive producer and production designer, like art director, the casting director. There were some valuable people, and I can't name everybody. That cast was amazing. All the cast. And the team that worked in the post was also amazing. I had amazing partners, from Adam Schwartz, who cut the film, Wade Odlum, who was the colorist. And so the film looks the way it looks because of Chris and because of Wade. The composer, Jay Watley, who he's a film composer that's on his way up. He's doing like Hollywood films. So, part of that tension that you spoke about, that you feel through the beginning, like it's related to his score. So as I said the negative, I have to say the positive because I had some amazing partners too.
And I got to get this out of the way because I am a fan of really, really good directors of photography. I felt that way about Greg Fraser, Roger Deakins, and Christopher Mabley. Your direction is already impeccable in terms of the wake, but Christopher Mabley's photography combined with the colorists, it is a very beautiful movie to look at. And it's there. I cannot, okay, with the exception of maybe one or two shots, everything is just so crisp. It's so good. It really does capture. Oops, sorry, there is something in my eye. But no, it is a beautiful, beautiful movie, and I honestly must commend Christopher Mabley's photography because it really does feel like he goes all out.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing he's the type of guy who throws himself into all of his projects. He's not the guy who, pardon my French, half-asses things.
No, no, I have to say he goes all in, and he was an amazing partner. I don't think I would have made the film without Chris. In fact, the story of this film, I went to Canada to shoot a commercial, and I ended up hiring Chris, and I had never worked with Chris. So we met on that set, and I think it was like a couple of shoot days, maybe 3 days, can't remember. But one day during lunch, I spoke to Chris because I was working on a feature that in theory I was going to start producing right after that commercial. And during lunch break, I got the call that the project was off, it was being pushed, blah 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 blah. So and talking to Chris. I told him, like this project that I told you I was going to do, it's just falling apart. And I'm like, I want to do something that's mine and something that I've written, even if it's a short, because I had my mindset that I was moving on to a feature. And then Chris said, well, is there a script that you've written that you think can be shot here? Because I would love to do that kind of work. And I had written the year before 2 shorts. One was The Wake. Another one was it's called Where Only the Devil Dares. But it was like an idea for a bigger movie. But it took place in Mexico. So I told him about The Wake, and he said send it. And it's funny because I left Canada. And I just told him that is one of those things that you don't really take seriously. But then he texted me like a week later. He was like, "Hey, don't forget to send me that script." And like, oh, okay. So I sent him the script, and then a few days later he wrote, "Hey man, I read it. I loved it. I want to make this movie. I want to do everything I can to make it happen. I can help you get gear, cameras. Because he works in commercials in Toronto, so he has connections in the industry that can help him." So he offered all this. And at that point is when I started thinking, oh, well, maybe this is something that I should be taking seriously. And yeah, eventually we did it. And he was like, yeah, again, an amazing partner, not only because of the work he did that you so well loved, but also because of all he did to make things happen.
I love stories like that because sorry about that. I hope you didn't hear that. But no, what I love is, people always talk about, when they hear like big name filmmakers, they're like, it's this person right here. This one singular individual is what kind of got the film made. And a lot of people, I kind of think, have very common misconceptions about, certain aspects on like certain fields on set, whether that be, like I said, during production or post. And, but it's a very collaborative process. It starts out collaborative, and it very does end collaboratively. And so to hear that, you had Chris essentially be like, Look, I know that this didn't work out, but if you have some, I'd love to read it. And you know, it's just it's nice to hear that you know there was always back and forth, and you guys it feels like you guys were on the same wavelength at least throughout
Sure.
most of the time.
And you know, to be honest, like because we hadn't worked, we really didn't have a history working together except for that commercial. You know, there were our bumps, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I'm also a photographer, I'm the kind of director that likes to, okay, this is the lens this is where the camera goes. I'm very specific, and sometimes it took a while for Chris and I to like, you know, click in that sense. But to be honest, we always saw the film in the same way. We did a lot of prep. We went through the script, broke down the script. I did storyboards, but also like we just went scene by scene and broke them down and talked very thoroughly about how we were going to shoot each scene. So when we came to the shoot, I feel we were very prepared. And eventually, you know, as the shoot progressed, I felt very confident and comfortable and knew that we were on the same page. So I was able to like focus more on directing the kids.
Okay, and that's good because I know there are some directors that like focus as much on actually shooting the movie as it is with working with the actors. So the fact that you know you had a director of photography who's like, no, I know where you're going to go with this. Focus on the kids. I'll get you the shot you need. You know, it's good to have a DP that you know, it's as you said, you guys may not have always been like, but like it's good to know that at least from the concept as a whole, you guys were like succinct so that you know there were times where it's clear that your attention needed to be more on the kids rather than you know on the actual shot. And there was something you brought up, which
And by the
I
way, it was never like that in a bad way. It's like sometimes I would say, hey, let's shoot this with a 75, and we go, no, but why don't we do it with this lens instead? And then I would like, okay, I'm not used to like being questioned like that, but eventually, you know, I just trusted because we were seeing the film in the same way, you know. So it was not, if it sounded like in a negative way, it
no, no,
wasn't.
no, 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 no. Of course not. It felt no, because like that's one of the best parts. Like I've had my fair share of shorts that I've worked on, and I've had my fair share of seeing interactions. Sometimes a director's like, well, like we need to do this, and DP steps in like, no, 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 try this, and then you're just kind of like, but I don't think like no, trust me, like just try this, and you try that, and you're just like, ah, crap, that's actually really good. That's actually much better than what I had planned. And sometimes it's vice versa, you know. Maybe the DP's like, we should try this. And you're like, can we try this instead? Just do a practice take. And then the DP's like, oh wow, that works better. It's
Yeah.
see, the way that you were describing it was like that, where it's like at one point you thought, let's try this. And he's like, no, 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 try this instead. This will work. And you're like, are you sure? And he's like, I trust me, I'm sure. It seems like it was more of a it may not have actually been that way, but it was more like just a brief discussion, playful banter, and then you know you tried it and you're just like, this works. You know, it never once came across a certain negative light. Just kind of seemed like you guys were working together in a very compatible manner. Which, which for those of you that have actually seen The Wake, you'll know, like Luis and Chris, their work together, just in terms of direction and like the way that the world is like feels through the lens of the camera. It's succinct. It is a beautiful looking film. And speaking of beautiful, you know, looks and settings, you shot this in Canada, I'm guessing. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Where exactly in Canada did you film it? Because if for those of you that have had the luxury of seeing it, you know that it basically it's just this beautiful environment filled with lush trees and just it has this very isolated but like sort of mountain town kind of feel. It's a really honest to God gorgeous place. Well, where did you shoot it and how'd you find it?
It was shot, most of the film was shot around a town called Milton in Ontario. If memory serves me well, it's like 45 minutes from Toronto. So it looks rural, but it's really not that far from Toronto. Yeah, and the story was supposed to take place somewhere in America, an unnamed small town. And I think you see it through American flags other things that I'm sure you saw in the film. But yeah, it was shot in Canada. Like conceptually, because part of the film, it's not entirely about that. I think it's funny, like someone, I read something not long ago, like a review on the film that I thought was very interesting because they picked up on a lot of things that I was trying to say, or like they're like hidden, it's not subliminal, or it's, I think on a surface it can feel like a thriller, but there's more than that in my, at least that's what I would say. That was the goal. And and part of it was the thing about guns, the theme of guns in America, and how kids perceive guns, and that the gun culture in America is very particular. Not many countries are anywhere near what happens in America. And around the time I wrote the script, I remember reading that year there have been over 360 or 350 mass shootings in the U.S., which was about one per day, which I was like shocked, because normally you read about the big ones and all unfortunate and tragic, like the ones you've seen in schools, but even we desensitized after a while, because it's been a long time since Columbine, right? And after, they don't have the same shock they used to, and so I thought, about making a story that had that theme in it without being entirely about that. So there is a bit of social commentary in the film, and I mean, it's a little detail, but every time you see a gun in the movie, you see the American flag somewhere in the screen. It's subliminal, but it's there. And so that's why the story, even though we shot it in Canada, I wanted to maintain the idea of taking place in America, because that element of the gun violence is obviously, people in Canada don't have guns the way they do in America.
No. For I think in America, it's like everyone and their grandma has are, as the kids would put it, be packing heat. And look, putting politics about whether or not you should own a gun or whatever on the side. What I enjoyed is there is a gun in the film. The whole thing starts off with the kids essentially finding a gun in a house that they robbed. And what I found rather interesting was, for the most part, I know quite a couple families that like the kids are well trained with guns, but that's only because the parents took it very, very seriously. They treat them like tools. Oh, if look, we keep guns in the house. The kids know about it, so if they're going to pick it up, they need to know like the safety rules, yada yada yada. But what I like is that in this film they show what happens a lot in a lot of households, where essentially sometimes a kid can grab their parent's gun or find a gun and just think they're like a cowboy, which there's a sequence in the film where after that guy, they get home from after robbing this old woman's house, and and he pretends to be a cowboy. Oh, wait, hold on. Was it a cowboy? Was it a cowboy? Was it? Oh my goodness! It was. Look, despite the partial unsettling sociopathic, you said you were trying to set up, it does come across that way, but as unsettling as it is, I know a lot of I know a lot of stories growing up, told from my. Sorry, we're experiencing a bit of a gust of wind here today. But what I know is there was a lot of stories I remember hearing growing up where, in a different age, there was a lot of, people would just take their dad's gun because, they didn't know any better, and they would treat him like a toy because, oh, we see it on TV. And no, I'm not blaming TV for gun violence, but, when you're a kid, you have an overactive imagination, And what I really enjoyed is that you still kind of get that,
Yeah.
it isn't played for laughs except for that cowboy scene. But then again, that's just mainly it. I didn't see that scene as a means of, oh, it's setting up what like how dark this kid is. Or it's not setting anything up like that. I saw more of this is just brothers trying to bond, but it's not, it can't work properly because they have an actual gun.
Yeah, no,
Um
and the thing is, he doesn't see the gun as something dangerous. And I think that's something cultural because like we grow up, like we get Christmas, like for Christmas, some kids get guns, like obviously toy guns, I mean,
yeah,
plastic ones. It can be like water gun, like we play like on PlayStation or any like any of those Xbox, any platform, like you're shooting at the screen, like you see it in movies, you see it in cartoons. It's like, and a lot of that is same for kids. So kids a lot of times don't feel like it's something dangerous. And that's the way he treats it. It's like, "Oh, I've seen this before. I feel comfortable with it. There's like,
yeah.
and that's, I mean, again, the story's not entirely about that, but yeah, that's part of it for sure.
I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing after what, without bringing up the incident that happened with a certain actor on a certain movie that happened back in October, I'm guessing you guys had a safety officer basically go over with Isaac, go over with all the kids, and like be like, okay, this is how you handle it. Don't point it at somebody. Like you briefed them. You made sure they were trained. You had
Yeah,
yeah,
that we did have a professional gun handler. We had a policeman on set that day while that scene was shot because obviously the noise and we were shooting in a park,
yeah.
so they had in case someone reported something or so we had cops, we had the gun handler, so it was all done the right way.
Okay, hold on a sec. Helicopter. My bad. Great, just a nice little awkward bit of just dead space. But no, I felt the need to bring that up a little bit, just in case some poor mother's watching, going, well, well, how are the kids supposed to know? Like, do they know it's like blah blah blah? No, but no, after what happened on that certain film, I think it would make a lot of people happy to know that you, as well as your cast, your crew, and even the police officers of the town, took, even if it was just as simple as a carbonated air pistol. It's good to know you guys took that very, very seriously. And I think you've just made a lot of people, especially people that worked around like firearm safety and film, very happy knowing you took that element, even though it's a major element, but it's not the main point of the story, still very seriously. That is very good to hear, especially in today's climate. So very, very proud to hear that. So I guess another thing I'd actually really want to know, and forgive me for not actually starting off asking this, is The Wake feels like a very surreal but very personal story. Where did the inspiration for it come from?
It's funny that you say that. It's a lot of things. There are a lot of things in the film. Obviously, there's a lot of fictional elements. There's always personal elements in the story that, like, there are things I experienced in my youth, or like uh, little things, like everything that you write. There's always a part of you in what you're writing, um, and obviously, it's like you said, it's surreal, or I would say there's an element of magical realism in the story, and the way it's funny, like the story came, it was a mix of things. One thing was what I was telling you about, like a story that revolved around guns, but I wanted to do something that it wasn't that black and white, or it wasn't like a story like, that we've seen, or like a mass shooting in a school. Like, I wanted to do it from a different perspective, and in a way that it wasn't that black and white, because the way they end up with a gun, it's not like they bought it. It's not like it was given to them. It ends up in their hands in the wrong way, but that's not the point. The point is, like, wherever there are guns, there's the tragedy can be around the corner. And so I mean, that's a part of the story. Another big part of the story for me was, like I said in the beginning, the relationship between the brothers. That's a big theme, and I think it's probably, if you ask me, like, my favorite bits are between the brothers, like when the brothers are in the bridge, like, when they are interacting, the relationship between them. I think that's the heart. There are obviously all the other things that I also like, but so telling a story that has to do with fraternal love, and that bonding between brothers, but again, from a point of view that it's not black and white. It's like, they're doing something, like things that are not great, that they're wrong. The older brother loves his brother. They love each other, and you can see that. However, you can say, but why is he taking him to do something that's dangerous and illegal, like breaking into people's homes? Like, if you love your brother, you wouldn't do. But for them, it's not dangerous. For them, it's not even wrong, because the people are dead. They don't need the stuff they're taking. They see things from a different perspective. That's why I say, like, Walter is a bit of a sociopath. But so there were all these elements in it. But the starting point for me, when I came up with the story, for a feature, it was about these two brothers that grew up in a small town somewhere in the U.S., and their parents own the funeral home in town. Maybe it's the only or one of the very few funeral homes in town. So whenever someone in the community died, the wake would take place where they lived. So they knew where people were, and they knew where people weren't. So they knew the house was empty, and that gave them the liberty to go and break into that home. So that was the starting point for the film. And when I started writing it, I wasn't 100% sure on how I would finish it, because I thought about it as a feature, and then I thought, well, if I write it as a short, at one point I thought, well, maybe I just write it as a proof of concept, for the feature. But then I just wanted to write something that had a solid ending that worked on its own. Does that make sense? Because sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes a proof of concept, so you just shoot a scene or you just shoot a moment, but it's not a film. So I had the desire, and more than the desire, I had the need to tell a story that was mine. I hadn't done a short film in a while. I had done 2 short films before, but it had been a while, and I just needed my voice behind the camera. So I came up with that ending. And honestly, I never rewrote the script. I wrote it in 2017, and that's the script I shot. The only thing I changed in the script is just two things. And since you've seen the movie, there are, and it's something I got after I went to Sanders' home, because one night I visit his family. I wanted to meet with him and his parents and just make sure that again, because I told you I wasn't 100% sure that he wanted to make the film. So I wanted to meet with him and tell him specifically everything that it would entail. And when I spent a few hours at their home, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you've seen Coda, but Sanders' family is very similar to the family in Coda. Like his mom is deaf and mute. His dad, he has two sisters. The oldest sister is deaf. He has, if memory serves me well, two brothers that are also deaf. And then the young sister, who is probably, I want to say like 3 years younger than Sander, is the only one that can hear and speak. So when I went there, when I was there, I saw the dynamics, how they interacted. Like when the mom was trying to get the attention of one of the kids, she would switch the lights on and off, and then they would react. Or a brother was trying to call the other, they would stomp on the floor. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, okay, these are things I don't have in the script. And I included them. I didn't write new scenes for it. I just incorporated it into scenes that were already written.
That right there, that is something I like to hear, because you know, like it's very easy to just write deaf characters. Essentially, just I write a normal character, and then, you know, just implement like sign language. But, you know, to actually get the fundamental dynamics of a household of people who are deaf, like getting those little, when I write and when I direct, I like little moments, because it's the little moments that kind of make the world feel real. It doesn't make it seem like cinematic or like a film. It just makes it feel like real people. And you're well right. And for those of you that have seen the movie, you know exactly those little moments that I'm talking about. So it's nice to know that, you know, because I'm like, does he know? Does Luis know somebody? Like these are very, very precise moments that that feel like you can only know if you're there. So it is great to know that you did visit his family. You're just kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I should add these elements into the script just to make it feel more lively. And they really do, and it really does. It feels when during the dinner scenes with when you have Martin and everyone else around the dinner table, it doesn't feel like, you know, they're talking and, you know, Xander's character Isaac's just, yes, yes, I understand everything you're saying, despite the fact my character, like, realistically shouldn't be able to hear what you're saying. It's nice to know that, like, because there's a scene where the mom's like talking to and then she turns her attention to you know, hold on, I'm sorry. Sorry, my phone turned off. I'm
Sander, yeah, to Martin.
Yeah, to Martin. Sorry, got the characters mixed up for a second. Want to make sure I got it down right. But she's talking to Walter, and then she immediately turns her attention to Martin and starts signing everything. And then when she turns her attention back, she does sign a little bit more to imply that, you know, Martin should still be hearing and listening. And it really is just, it's a nice little touch to really give meat to the world and to the family dynamic. And I do agree with you in terms of what, you know, one of the big inspirations and the biggest elements of the movie is, and that's brotherly love. People, I do understand. I did look up a couple reviews for this movie, and I think I know which one you're talking about, because one of them gave it like it just kind of gave it a more fair score. But one of the unfair elements was, what kind of brother would take like his younger sibling and do this stuff? It doesn't seem like he cares at all. It seems like he hates his brother. And, you know, as someone with a sibling, you know, when you're young and stupid, and, you know, despite how, you know, siblings fight, that's the thing that happens. But at the same time, there are times when you're just kind of like, hey, want to go do this stupid thing with me? You're not asking them because you don't like them to do that stupid thing. You want them included because you love your sibling, and it doesn't matter whether or not that thing you're doing is right or wrong. You want them to be a part of it. It's not
you want somebody to have your back, and yeah, who better than your brother?
Exactly. And that's the real take. That's one of the things, you know, I grew up with friends and I grew up with cousins who, you know, I have a sister, so it's a little different, but you know, I watched the brotherly dynamics of my friends and my cousins, and, you know, that's what I saw in The Wake is very reminiscent, you know. Yeah, you know, hey, I'm gonna do something stupid. Want to join? Only if I can do the same dumb thing you're doing. That's what I love. That's really, if you're gonna watch The Wake, watch it for the two kids. They are it is always a delight watching them work together. And even that cowboy scene, which is while slightly disturbing because of the implication, it is exactly the type of thing two brothers in that situation would do. It's great overall. You want to know what? Before I go into praising the film and asking you where people can see it, I actually would like to know, what are some hopes that you yourself hope that people will take away from the wake?
That's interesting. That's interesting. Honestly, it's not. I would like people to take the film for what it is. It's not a feel good story. It's a journey. Uh, Again, trying to talk about it
Without spoiling the ending, yeah.
without talking too much about, without saying too much, but it's but it's real life. I tend to like movies. Here's the thing, and this might seem very simplistic, but this is what I like in movies. And this is perhaps one of the reasons that I cannot watch superhero movies. I can't stand them. And because I don't like to watch a movie that I know how it's gonna end. If you're gonna go see Batman or Superman or a lot of the Marvel movies, you kind of know pretty much there's like a formula, right? You know how the superhero is saving something, then eventually he runs into this rival that beats him up for a couple of times, and then the superhero has to find a way to defeat him, and at the end he prevails. And I know it's very simplistic, but for the most part, that's like what happens in those movies and many movies. And I don't like, for me, movies are like a ride. I like to not know what's going to happen, not know how they're going to end, and keep me guessing. And when I say that, it's not about like surprise endings, or it's just like, because life is unexpected. Like you don't know like what's going to happen. Like in real life, sometimes the bad guys do get away. And I know sometimes in movies it's like, no, the bad guy has to pay. There are these like cliches and these like things that people like tell one another, and they are in books, and then that's why people keep making the same movies over and over again, and sometimes that's why it's hard to come up with something fresh. And I'm not saying I've broken the mold and I've made a movie that it's never been done before, or it's the most original one, but for the most part, I do like stories and movies where the journey's a bit unpredictable, unexpected. Like I don't know, I don't want to sit down and start watching a movie and know where it's gonna end.
That is, after watching The Wake, I do kind of see where you're coming from. Life can sometimes be horrendously unpredictable. And sometimes
It's a roller coaster. Life is a roller coaster.
and it doesn't end the way you might think it does sometimes. And honestly, The Wake, I do think, yeah, okay, I will admit, yes, you don't break the mold, you haven't found a way to revolutionize filmmaking, but in terms of the story that you told, I do believe that, I mean, for God's sakes, I didn't see that ending coming. I did not. I remember going, oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, yikes. No, I do get where you're coming from. And I do think in terms of a roller coaster and unpredictability, it's The Wake, it perfectly does encapsulate that sort of feeling. And honestly, I am beyond glad I got to watch it. So thank you honestly for making it. And I honestly would like to know, is there any way for people to watch this? Like, with the exception of the festival run, maybe there's a way someone can watch it.
Eventually, but the film just started a festival. The film was just out on its first festival on April 7th. It premiered at the Cleveland Film Festival, and also almost simultaneously ran on on the Black Maria Thomas Edison Film Festival. And fortunately, it won awards at both. And so so it just started its festival run. I'm not sure when the film will be available, but it will eventually be available. So yeah, unfortunately, I cannot give you a specific time or date in that regard.
Okay, hey, don't worry, that's perfectly fine. So I guess the last thing I'd like to know, and I think other people who at least have seen The Wake would like to know, is what's next for you? Are there any sort of projects that you have coming down the pipeline that you are kind of, maybe you don't want to give away, but you might be giddy to like at least infer what they might be?
Yeah, there was one film which was the one that I spoke about earlier that I was almost about to do, and because that movie got postponed, it's still alive. It still has a pulse. It's called A Blind Eye, and so that's still floating around. Hopefully, it gets to see a light of day. Kind of like The Wake, I've noticed like there's like something that I tend to like when I write, and it's a blend of social commentary wrapped in genre. It's like so it's a bit like what you see in The Wake. So there's A Blind Eye that has to do with an illegal immigrant that crosses the waters from Dominican Republic into Puerto Rico and starts working illegally at a house, and it's like, you know, she's psychologically affected by the journey, because and that's all like a real life thing. It's a journey that it happens constantly. It's been happening for ages through the Caribbean Sea, and a lot of people do not make it. And it's actually something that happens not just in the Caribbean Sea. It's been happening in Hastings in northern England. It's been happening in the south of Spain. It's been happening so. It's not just a story that only happens in between Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. So there is that project. There is a script I wrote last year called Where Only the Devil Dares, which I mentioned earlier as well, because I had written the short. And that's a film, that's a script that I do hope gets made. If I had to choose, make one, that would be the one. Because I know there's a very good movie there. And it's an idea that I came up with in 2010. And I wrote the outline in 2010, and only last year, because of COVID, I found the time to sit down and write it. And then there's a feature version of The Wake in the works.
Ooh, well, honestly, whichever comes first, I'll be right there to watch it. I honestly am deeply excited to see where you go from here, because if The Wake is literally anything to go by, you have a tendency to make some truly thought-provoking and wonderfully shot films. So wherever you choose to do next, you have a fan right here waiting to see it.
Thank you.
Hey,
hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again about any of those.
I look forward to it. Luis, everybody, I look out for The Wake if you can, and whatever you choose to make next, I hope for the absolute best. I really do thank you for coming and talking with me today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, no problem. Take care, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Luis, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye.